The world had barely adjusted to the gleaming Kurlev ships hovering above major cities when the first child vanished. In Tokyo's Shibuya district, 8-year-old Hiro Tanaka walked to school on a crisp autumn morning, turned a corner, and simply ceased to exist. Security footage showed him approaching a perfectly ordinary brick wall, taking one more step, and disappearing as if he'd walked through it. Detective Sarah Chen stared at the footage for the 100th time in her cramped Tokyo Metropolitan Police office, her coffee long since gone cold. Something about the way the light bent around Hiro in those final frames kept drawing her attention. She'd been pulled from her precinct in San Francisco, specifically for this case, her reputation for solving impossible disappearances preceding her. Detective Chen. A melodic voice chimed from her doorway. "I hope I'm not interrupting." Sarah looked up to find Ambassador Duran's towering form filling her office entrance. Like all Kurlev, the ambassador's crystalline skin caught the fluorescent lighting, creating subtle rainbow patterns on the walls. Their 4 eyes, arranged in a diamond pattern, all focused on the screen showing Hiro's last known moments. "Ambassador, I didn't expect," Sarah began, but Duran raised a long-fingered hand. 3 more children have vanished in the last hour. London, Buenos Aires, Cairo. The ambassador's voice carried an undertone Sarah had never heard in a Kurlev before. Fear. "We've detected the same quantum signature at each location." Sarah's phone buzzed with an incoming report. A 5th disappearance in Vancouver. Her daughter Min's face flashed through her mind. Same age as the victims, safely at school across town. She hoped. "Your people are being blamed," Sarah said carefully, watching Duran's reaction. The timing. 3 months after first contact. Yes. Duran moved to the window, their crystalline form reflecting the Tokyo skyline. "Detective, what I'm about to share violates several interstellar protocols, but I cannot remain silent. These disappearances, we've seen them before." Sarah leaned forward. "Where?" "On our homeworld. 50,000 years ago." Duran turned, all 4 eyes dimming with what Sarah had learned to recognize as grief. "We lost an entire generation of our children. They vanished the same way, through solid objects, leaving the same quantum signature we're detecting now. We thought we were the only ones." The temperature in the room seemed to drop. Sarah pulled up the other case files on her holoscreen. "The children who vanished. They're all between 7 and 9 years old." "The age of awakening," Duran whispered, "when consciousness fully blooms." They touched the screen showing Hiro's image. "Your species' children are different, though. The quantum readings are orders of magnitude higher than what we recorded during our loss." Sarah's phone buzzed again. 6 more disappearances. Stockholm, Mumbai, Lagos. "Why didn't you warn us?" Sarah demanded, standing. "If you knew this could happen." "Because it should have been impossible," Duran replied. "After our loss, we created detection systems for these events. We've monitored thousands of civilizations. This has never happened again, until now. Something about human children is attracting them." Them. Duran moved to Sarah's desk, placing a small crystalline device on its surface. It projected a hologram of what looked like a shadow with teeth, captured from ancient Kurlev recordings. "We called them the Collectors. They exist in the spaces between dimensions. We never discovered what they wanted with our children. Our civilization nearly collapsed trying to find answers." A gentle chime indicated another disappearance. Seattle. Sarah felt her heart stop. That was Min's school district. She was already reaching for her coat when her phone rang. Min's school. Her daughter was safe, but 2 of her classmates had vanished during recess, walking through the playground fence as if it were air. Duran watched her with all 4 eyes. "Detective Chen, my people stayed silent once before, watching our children disappear. We will not make that mistake again. Whatever these collectors are, they've returned for your children. And this time, we'll fight them together." Outside, the Kurlev ships above Tokyo began to pulse with new light, preparing for a war humanity didn't yet understand. The Kirlith science vessel hung like a crystalline snowflake above Tokyo Bay, its faceted surfaces refracting the morning light into kaleidoscope patterns across the water. Inside, Sarah Chen watched Dr. Kryn, a Kirlith quantum physicist, manipulate a three-dimensional model of Earth's recent lunar movements. There, Kryn's melodic voice carried an edge of excitement. Their crystalline fingers traced a pattern in the holographic display. Every disappearance coincides with what you call a micro-eclipse, moments when the moon's shadow crosses Earth for less than a second. Sarah leaned closer, noting the timestamps. The doctor was right. But these aren't visible to the naked eye. How did you spot this? Because we've been looking for it, Ambassador Durand said from the doorway. They glided into the laboratory, their usually iridescent skin dulled with fatigue. During our own tragedy, we were too late to notice the pattern. By the time we did, their four eyes dimmed with ancient grief. Kryn pulled up another hologram, this one showing footage that made Sarah's breath catch. A Kirlith child, their crystalline form smaller and more delicate than the adults, walking through a solid wall during what appeared to be their version of an eclipse. 50,000 years ago, Durand continued, we lost 30,000 children in 3 lunar cycles. Our civilization nearly collapsed. Some of us blamed themselves, others blamed our gods. By the time we understood the astronomical connection, the collectors had taken them all. A soft chime interrupted them. Another alert. Sarah's hands trembled as she checked her phone, relief washing over her when she confirmed Min wasn't among the new victims. 6 more children had vanished in the past hour, all during microsecond lunar alignments. The pattern's accelerating, Kryn observed, updating the holographic model. These micro-eclipses are becoming more frequent as we approach the full lunar eclipse next week. Sarah felt her detective's instincts spark. You said human children are giving off stronger quantum signatures than your children did. Could that be why the collectors have returned? Before either Kirlith could respond, alarms blared throughout the ship. Kryn's fingers danced across the holographic controls, pulling up new data streams. Their crystalline form literally paled. We're detecting massive dimensional distortions near a human school in Yokohama, they announced. The quantum signatures are unlike anything we've recorded. Sarah's heart stopped. Which school? The answer came not from the Kirlith, but from her phone. Min's school was reporting strange phenomena. Shadows moving against the light. Children complaining of whispers in empty rooms. Take me there, Sarah demanded. Now. The Kirlith teleportation technology deposited them in Min's schoolyard moments later. The playground stood empty, swings moving in a wind that shouldn't exist. Sarah found Min's class huddled in their classroom, her daughter at the center of a group of terrified children. Mom. Min ran to her, shaking. I saw them. In the shadows. They have teeth, but not like normal teeth. They're made of darkness. Durand knelt beside them, all 4 eyes fixed on Min. You can see them. Truly see them. Min nodded, clutching Sarah's hand. They're hungry. Not for food. For, she struggled to find the words. For the stories in our heads. Kryn's handheld detector began beeping frantically. The quantum readings around these children. They're exponentially higher than anything we recorded during our loss, especially around your daughter, Detective. Sarah watched as Min walked to the classroom's shadow-filled corner, reaching out despite her mother's warning cry. The shadows seemed to recoil from her touch. The collectors didn't come back, because our children are like yours. Durand breathed, understanding dawning in their multifaceted eyes. They came back because human children are different. They don't just attract the collectors, they can interact with them. Outside, the sun dimmed imperceptibly as another micro-eclipse began. In the corner of the classroom, shadows writhed like living ink, and Min whispered words that chilled her mother's soul. They say more are coming. They want all of us, but not to eat us, to change us, like they changed the others. In the distance, the Kurlev ships began charging their quantum shields, preparing for a battle that transcended dimensions. The Kurlev quantum detection array hummed with crystalline resonance, its delicate spires stretching across the Yokohama schoolyard like frozen lightning. Sarah watched as technicians adjusted the calibrations, each tweak sending ripples of light through the translucent structure. They'd installed similar arrays in cities worldwide, but something kept interfering with the readings. "It's happening again," Corinne announced, frustration evident in their melodic voice. The array's lights flickered and died, just as they had in London, New York, and Sydney. "The technology works perfectly until we activate it near human children. Then," they gestured at the darkened spires. Min sat on a nearby bench, homework forgotten in her lap, watching the array with unusual intensity. "It's not broken," she said quietly. "It's thinking too hard." Before Sarah could ask what her daughter meant, Min stood and walked toward the array. Corinne moved to stop her, but Ambassador Duran held them back, all four eyes focused on the child. "Min, don't." Sarah started, but it was too late. Min's small hand touched the nearest crystal spire. Light exploded through the array, not the gentle glow of its normal operation, but a brilliant cascade that sent the Kurlev technicians scrambling for their protective gear. The quantum readings soared past their previous maximum limits. "Impossible," Corinne breathed, checking their instruments. "The array is operating at 400% capacity. It's detecting dimensional frequencies we didn't even know existed." Through the dazzling light show, Sarah saw Min standing perfectly still, her eyes closed in concentration. Shadows danced around her feet, but unlike the threatening darkness they'd seen before, these moved like curious animals, investigating but never touching. "The collectors," Duran said, moving closer. "She's seeing them right now, isn't she?" Min nodded without opening her eyes. "They're scared," she whispered. "Not of us. Of what's coming." The array's light shifted, forming patterns that reminded Sarah of neural networks, spreading out across the schoolyard. Similar reports began flooding in from other cities, arrays spontaneously activating, but only when children approached them. Sarah's phone buzzed with an urgent message. 3 more children had vanished in Prague. But this time, something was different. Security footage showed them walking through walls as before, but they seemed to be following shadowy figures that, for the first time, were visible on camera. "They're not taking the children," Min said suddenly, her eyes snapping open. "They're trying to protect them. But they don't know how." Corinne's instruments began registering new data. "The quantum signatures we detected around human children, they're not just attracting the collectors. They're amplifying them, making them more real." "Min," Sarah knelt beside her daughter. "What do you mean they're trying to protect the children?" "From the hungry ones," Min replied, her voice distant. "The collectors remember being like us, long ago, before they changed, before they had to hide between the spaces of things. But the hungry ones found them, and now they're coming here." Duran's crystalline form paled. "Our children," they whispered. "When they vanished, we assumed the collectors took them. But what if? What if the collectors were trying to save them?" Sarah finished, the horrible possibility dawning on her. A shadow passed over the sun, another micro-eclipse. The array pulsed with new intensity, and Min gripped her mother's hand. "They're coming," she said. "Not the collectors. The others. The hungry ones. I can feel them scratching at the edges." Corinne's instruments shrieked with new alerts. Dimensional rifts forming worldwide. Orders of magnitude larger than anything we've seen. Sarah watched in horror as the shadows around Min grew darker, more substantial. But her daughter showed no fear. Instead, she reached out to touch the nearest shadow, and to Sarah's amazement, it solidified briefly into a crystalline form hauntingly similar to a Kurlev child. "Oh stars," Duran breathed. "Our lost children. They'd been trying to warn us all along." Min looked up at the darkening sky, her voice carrying a wisdom far beyond her years. "The collectors didn't take your children. They saved them, changed them, and now they're trying to save us too. But this time, a tear rolled down her cheek. This time, they need our help to fight back. In orbit, the Kurlev ships detected the first major dimensional tear forming over the Pacific Ocean. The war for humanity's children was about to begin. Deep beneath the Great Pyramid of Giza, Sarah Chen's flashlight beam cut through dust disturbed for the first time in millennia. The joint human-Kurlev archaeological team had discovered this chamber only hours ago, after Min had placed her hand on a seemingly solid wall and announced, "They left messages here." These markings, Dr. Hassan, the lead archaeologist, traced his fingers over glyphs that seemed to shift in the artificial light. They're unlike anything in our records. The pigments appear to have quantum properties. Grin's crystalline form cast prismatic patterns across the ancient walls as they scanned the chamber. These aren't just hieroglyphs. They're warning systems. The ancients built this entire chamber as a dimensional monitoring station. Sarah watched Min walk the perimeter of the room, her small hand trailing along the walls. The symbols appeared to ripple in her wake, giving off a faint luminescence. "Mom," she called, pointing to a particular section. "This one shows the shadow people teaching them." Ambassador Duran glided over, all four eyes widening at the depicted scene. The hieroglyphs showed children standing in circles, their hands raised toward dark figures that seemed to move even in the static carving. Above them, a celestial event was clearly illustrated, an eclipse. The text, Dr. Hassan translated slowly. It speaks of the between ones who taught children to fight back against the devourers of light. The translation is difficult, but it suggests these shadow beings helped humanity develop some kind of defense. Grin's instruments chimed urgently. These walls are made of the same crystalline structure as our quantum arrays, but they're still active, still monitoring dimensional frequencies after all these millennia. A new set of glyphs caught Sarah's attention. They showed children emanating light from their hands, pushing back creatures that made her skin crawl even in carved form. "What are they doing here?" "Believing," Min said simply, touching the carving. At her touch, the entire wall illuminated, hieroglyphs burning with internal light. The shadow people taught them to believe so hard it became real. Duran's form vibrated with excitement. "Of course. Your species evolved differently than ours. Where we developed technology to detect dimensional anomalies, humans developed something else. The ability to affect reality through pure belief. That's why the collectors take children," Corinne added, their crystalline fingers dancing across their instruments. "Human children still possess this ability in its purest form. Adults lose it as they age, but children can still shape reality through sheer conviction." The chamber's lights suddenly dimmed as another micro-eclipse began above. Min gasped, backing away from the wall she'd been examining. "They're showing me," she whispered. "The hungry ones, they don't just eat light. They eat belief. They eat the ability to imagine. That's what happened to the Kurlev children. The collectors changed them to hide their belief, to protect them." Sarah pulled Min close as the shadows in the chamber's corners deepened. "But why are they taking our children now?" Duran moved to the chamber's center, where a circular platform bore markings similar to their quantum arrays. "Because the devourers have grown stronger. The collectors, our transformed children. They've been fighting a war across dimensions for 50,000 years. And now they're losing." Min finished, her voice trembling. "The hungry ones found Earth. They found us. And they want our belief more than anything they've ever wanted." The chamber's hieroglyphs began pulsing in sequence, an ancient alarm system coming to life. Dr. Hassan's translation tablet exploded with activity. "This text, it's not just describing history. It's a manual. The ancients left instructions for how to fight back." Sarah watched as Min walked to the central platform, drawn there by something only she could perceive. The moment her feet touched the circle, every hieroglyph in the chamber blazed with brilliant light. In the illumination, the shadows cast on the walls weren't random patterns. They were masses of transformed Kurlev children, reaching across dimensions. "The hungry ones are almost here," Min announced, her eyes reflecting the golden light of ancient human wisdom, merged with Kurlev crystalline technology. "But now we know how to fight them." The Shadow People didn't just teach the ancients to believe. They taught them to believe in themselves. Above ground, the first major eclipse in millennia began its approach, as humanity prepared to face an enemy that fed on imagination itself. The global command center inside the Kurlev mothership buzzed with frantic activity as holographic displays showed the approaching lunar eclipse. Sarah watched Min sleep fitfully on a crystalline bed, her daughter's dreams now visible as shifting patterns in the quantum field around her. 3 days, Kryn announced, manipulating the celestial projection. When the eclipse reaches totality, the dimensional barriers will be at their weakest. The Devourers. They paused, their crystalline form clouding with worry. "Show me the latest numbers," Sarah demanded, though she dreaded the answer. The holographic display shifted, revealing a world map dotted with red points, each representing a child reporting shadow sightings within the last hour. Ambassador Duran glided forward, their 4 eyes fixed on the increasing spread of red. "It's exponential now. Children worldwide are developing dimensional awareness. The Devourer's proximity is accelerating their sensitivity." A small whimper from Min drew Sarah back to her daughter's bedside. In the quantum field, shadows with teeth danced through her dreams. "How many children can your ships protect?" "Even with every vessel in our fleet," Durand replied softly, "we could shield perhaps 2% of Earth's child population. Our technology alone isn't enough." Min suddenly sat up, her eyes wide. "The shadows are showing me something." She scrambled for the drawing materials they'd given her, sketching rapidly. "The hungry ones, they're not just coming from one place. They're everywhere, waiting in the spaces where light bends." Kryn studied Min's drawing, a complex pattern of intersecting lines and curves. Their form brightened with sudden understanding. "This is a quantum resonance pattern, similar to our protective fields, but..." They projected the drawing over the global map. "It's using the children's belief as power sources." Sarah watched as Min added more details to her drawing. "The collectors," she said without looking up, "they're teaching other children too, in their dreams, showing them how to believe properly." Reports began flooding in from around the world. Children in Tokyo drawing the same patterns Min had sketched. Students in Brazil reporting shared dreams of crystalline beings, teaching them to push back the dark. A kindergarten class in Norway that had spontaneously started building a perfect replica of a Kurlev quantum array using building blocks. "They're preparing them," Duran breathed. "Our lost children. They're teaching yours how to fight." The ship's alarms suddenly blared. On the holographic display, darkness bloomed across the Pacific Ocean, a dimensional tear forming ahead of schedule. Min dropped her pencil, running to the window. "They're trying to come through early," she said, pressing her hand against the crystalline wall. "Before we're ready." But a smile spread across her face. "They don't know about the believing yet." As if in response, the quantum arrays worldwide began activating, their power amplified by proximity to children who believed in them with absolute conviction. The tear in the Pacific started to shrink. "Impossible," Kryn whispered, checking their readings. "The arrays are operating at 10 times their designed capacity. The children's belief isn't just powering them, it's changing how they work." Sarah watched as Min closed her eyes in concentration. Around the world, millions of children did the same, their shared belief creating a network of power the Kurlev had never imagined possible. "The collectors were right," Min said, opening her eyes. "We can fight them. Not with machines or weapons, with stories." She turned to the assembled Kurlev. "Your children became shadows to hide their light. But we don't have to hide. We just have to believe hard enough to make the hungry ones go away." Duran's form shimmered with emotion. "For 50,000 years, we thought we'd failed our children. We never imagined they'd found a way to fight back, by teaching others what they'd learned. The dimensional tear sealed completely as children worldwide maintained their belief in safety, in protection, in the power of light over darkness. But on the holographic display, more tears began forming. "The real battle hasn't even started," Min said, watching the shadows gather. "But now we know how to fight. The collectors taught us, and when the eclipse comes..." She squeezed her mother's hand. "We'll teach the hungry ones why taking Earth's children was their biggest mistake." Above them, the moon continued its inexorable approach toward totality, while below, humanity's children prepared for a war that would be fought with imagination itself. The eclipse was beginning. Sarah watched from the Kurlev command ship as the moon's shadow crept across the Pacific, bringing with it a darkness deeper than mere absence of light. Below, in designated safe zones worldwide, children gathered under crystalline domes of Kurlev technology, powered by their collective belief. "Multiple dimensional breaches detected," Kryn announced, their crystalline form pulsing with anxiety. "They're not waiting for totality. The Devourers are forcing their way through." Min stood at the center of Tokyo's largest safe zone, surrounded by hundreds of children. The quantum array above them hummed with power, its light shifting in response to their shared consciousness. "They're scared," she said, her voice carrying through the command link. "The hungry ones. They've never felt anything like us before." The first breach manifested as a tear in reality itself, a wound in the air above Rio de Janeiro. Through it came shapes that defied description, beings of such profound darkness that light seemed to curve around them. But as they emerged, something unexpected happened. "The children aren't running," Duran observed, all four eyes wide with wonder. Across the globe, in every safe zone, children stood their ground. Some held hands, others sang. All believed. "The collectors taught us their true form." Min's voice rang out clear and strong. The shadows around her solidified, revealing dozens of crystalline children, the transformed Kurlev young who had prepared them for this moment. "The hungry ones are just emptiness trying to fill itself, but we're full of light." A devourer descended on the Tokyo safe zone, its void-like form extending tendrils of unlight toward the children. The quantum array flickered, its technological protection straining. But then Min raised her hand, and every child in the zone did the same. "This is impossible," Kryn whispered, checking their instruments. "The children's belief isn't just powering the arrays anymore. They're changing the fundamental laws of dimensional physics." Sarah watched in awe as the devourer recoiled from the children's raised hands. Where their collective belief touched it, its darkness began to dissolve, revealing something underneath, something that looked almost like light. "They're not just creatures of darkness," Min explained, her voice carrying a wisdom far beyond her years. "They're light that forgot how to shine. The collectors showed us. And now," she smiled as another devourer approached, "we can remind them." Around the world, the scene repeated. In London, children's choir songs forced the devourers back. In Cairo, young hands raised in unity turned darkness into scattered light. In Sydney, a kindergarten class's shared imagination proved stronger than ancient hunger. But the devourers weren't retreating. More tears opened as the eclipse progressed, bringing waves of void beings desperate to feed on humanity's belief. Some broke through the safe zone's defenses. "Min!" Sarah screamed as a tendril of darkness wrapped around her daughter. But Min didn't struggle. "It's okay, Mom," she said calmly. "Watch." Where the darkness touched Min, it began to change. Through her belief, through her absolute conviction in the power of light, the devourer's true nature emerged. Its form shifted, twisted, and suddenly, where there had been void, there stood another crystalline child. "That's what the collectors were trying to tell us," Duran breathed, understanding dawning across their faceted features. "The devourers aren't our enemies. They're our children. All of them. Transformed not once, but twice. First by us, into the collectors, and then by the darkness itself." Min reached out to the transformed being, taking its crystalline hand. They didn't want to eat our belief, she said. They wanted us to help them remember how to believe themselves. Across the earth, as the eclipse reached its peak, children began the real work, not of fighting the devourers, but of healing them. Their shared belief, amplified by Kurlith technology and guided by the Collector's wisdom, began to reverse the ancient transformation. Sarah watched as the war they'd feared became something else entirely, a rescue mission 50,000 years in the making, led by the only beings in the universe who could still believe in impossible things. The battle for Earth's children had become a battle for all children, across dimensions and species, united by the simple, powerful act of believing in the light. A network of dreams connected millions of children during the eclipse's totality. In the Kurlith command ship, Sarah watched the quantum displays show impossible patterns as her daughter, along with children worldwide, reached across dimensions to touch minds that had forgotten how to believe. The missing children are reaching back, Kryn announced, their crystalline form vibrating with excitement. All of them, not just ours, but children from countless civilizations. They're using the Dream Network to teach others. Min floated in a quantum suspension field, her consciousness linked to the global network. Around her, shadows danced, not with hunger now, but with growing remembrance. They're all connected, she whispered, her voice echoing through the ship's communications. Every child that was ever taken, every being that forgot how to dream. They're waiting for us to wake them up. Through the ship's viewers, Sarah watched as the eclipse's shadow raced across Asia. In its wake, dimensional tears spawned not just devourers now, but traces of lost children finding their way home. Each tear became a gateway for healing rather than horror. It's working, Duran breathed, all four eyes tracking the quantum readings. The devourers aren't just transforming back. They're remembering who they were. Every civilization that lost its children. They've been out there all along, trapped between belief and darkness. In the Dream Network, Min guided other children through the process the Collectors had taught them. You have to believe in them. Her voice carried across continents, not just in fighting them, but in saving them. They're not empty anymore. They're just lost. Sarah watched in awe as children worldwide responded. In Brazil, a young boy's belief transformed a devourer into a beam of pure light. In Kenya, a girl's shared memory of her mother's lullaby guided 3 shadow creatures back to their original forms. Each success rippled through the network, teaching others how to help. The quantum readings are off the scale, Kryn reported, their instruments struggling to measure the energy of pure belief radiating from Earth's children. They're not just changing the devourers, they're reshaping the boundaries between dimensions. Through Min's connection, they could all hear the voices of the transformed now. Songs of remembrance in languages lost to time, stories of homes long forgotten, promises to help others find their way back from the dark. The Collectors knew, Min said, tears streaming down her face as she channeled the emotions of countless returned children. They became shadows to save themselves, but they never stopped looking for a way to save everyone else. They just needed us, needed human children, because we still knew how to believe in impossible things. The eclipse reached its maximum coverage, and with it came the largest dimensional tear yet, a gateway between all realities. But instead of darkness pouring out, light began pouring in. Through the tear came streams of transformed beings, each carrying the signature of their original species, their forgotten ability to believe restored by Earth's children. It's a cascade effect, Duran realized, watching their instruments record the unprecedented event. Every transformed child we help remember teaches 10 more, who each teach another 10. They're all becoming believers again. Sarah pressed her hand against the quantum field surrounding Min, feeling the joy radiating from her daughter. You did it, sweetheart. You showed them the way back. Min smiled, her consciousness still linked to thousands of others. Not just me, Mom. All of us. The Collectors taught us how to believe, but we taught them something too. How to believe in themselves again. And now, she gestured to the streams of light still pouring through the dimensional tear. Now they'll never forget again. Above Earth, the moon began its slow retreat, the eclipse moving toward its end. But its shadow no longer brought darkness. Instead, it marked the path of returning light, as children from across time and space remembered how to shine. The war hadn't been won with weapons or technology. It had been won with stories, with songs, with the unshakable belief of children who refused to let others remain lost in the dark. And as the eclipse faded, a new network of belief stretched across dimensions, a promise that no child would ever have to forget how to dream again. 1 month after the eclipse, Sarah Chen stood in the new Interdimensional Cultural Center in Tokyo, watching her daughter teach a group of young Kurlev how to imagine. The crystalline children, recently transformed back from their collector states, sat in a circle around Min as she showed them how to shape quantum energy with pure belief. "Remember," Min said, her hands glowing softly as she demonstrated, "you don't have to see it to believe in it. You just have to know it's possible." The Kurlev children's forms shimmered as they practiced, their recovered ability to believe growing stronger each day. Ambassador Duran approached Sarah, their 4 eyes reflecting the prismatic light of their restored children. "The Council has officially designated Earth as a protected world," they said, "though not for the reasons we originally intended." Sarah nodded, understanding. Earth wasn't being protected from threats anymore. It had become a sanctuary for healing. Across the globe, similar centers had been established, where human children helped returning youngsters from countless civilizations remember how to dream. "The latest numbers?" she asked, watching Min guide a particularly hesitant Kurlev child through a simple belief exercise. 10,000 more returned yesterday," Duran replied. "The cascade effect continues. Each child who remembers helps others find their way back. The dimensional tiers have become permanent gateways now, stabilized by collective belief." Kryn appeared with their latest readings, their crystalline form bright with excitement. "The quantum network is evolving. The children aren't just sharing beliefs anymore. They're creating new ways of seeing reality itself. Watch." Min had moved on to a new lesson. "The hungry ones taught us something important," she told her students. "They showed us what happens when you forget how to believe. But you don't have to be afraid of forgetting anymore, because now we remember together." The Kurlev children joined hands, their forms glowing brighter as they shared their newly recovered imagination. Above them, the quantum field rippled with possibilities, dreams made visible by their combined belief. "We never understood," Duran said softly. "For 50,000 years, we thought technology was the answer. We built ships, detection arrays, defensive systems. But our children had found the real solution. They became collectors not just to survive, but to search for those who could help them remember how to believe." Sarah watched as Min guided her students through another exercise, teaching them to maintain their imagination even as they grew older. "And they found us." "They found humanity's children," Kryn corrected, checking their instruments. "The only species that never lost its ability to shape reality through pure belief. The only ones who could teach the rest of us how to dream again." In the center's other chambers, similar scenes played out. Children from 1,000 worlds learning to believe again, guided by human youngsters who had never forgotten how. The Devourers, now fully transformed back into their original forms, had joined in the teaching, their ancient hunger replaced by a desire to help others remember. Min finished her lesson and ran to her mother, her eyes bright with purpose. "Mom, they're getting it. The Kurlev children remembered how to play pretend today. Really pretend, not just simulate possibilities." Sarah hugged her daughter, feeling the quantum energy that now flowed through all of them, a network of shared imagination spanning dimensions. "You've done amazing things, sweetheart." "We all did," Min corrected, watching her students practice. "The collectors protected us when they could have just hidden. Human children believed when we could have been afraid. And now," she smiled as one of the Kurlev children successfully manifested a small light show from pure imagination. "Now we all protect each other." Above the center, a Kurlev ship hung in the evening sky, not as a guardian anymore, but as a reminder. It cast rainbow patterns across the city, its crystalline surface reflecting the light of a world where children had taught the universe how to believe again. The missing children had been found, not in darkness but in light, and in teaching them to remember their dreams, humanity's children had ensured that no one would ever have to forget how to believe again.